Bujo. My name is Myeengun, and I'm here on this day to celebrate with you. We're into the spring season now, and the snow has kind of found its way away from here. And I think everybody in Ontario is pretty happy, except for those who are in the regions of the snowstorms that we get still. And I think there's some winter still biting a little bit. But here in Waterloo, we're having a really good week, and we're having a chance to feel the beautiful southern warm winds that come with the springtime. But I also know that if you've ever been to the University of Waterloo, the geese are really finding their way right now. We're really known for the geese that live in the Waterloo campus, and they're a little aggressive right now. In fact, I just came from my car, and these two geese were trying to kill me. So I got a little close to their nest, I think. But anyway, they were making a lot of noise, and I think you have to be a little careful this time of year when you're walking through, because they'll come after you. But anyway, welcome to our segment of Nish Vibes. It's been quite a interesting journey, walking through a podcast that celebrates the accomplishments of many of our staff and community members who joined me for this hour. And it's been really fun, because in order to learn people and find out a little bit more about them, it's so nice to have a conversation. And conversations kind of tell you a lot about a person. And that's really what Nish Vibes is about, trying to establish relationships and build knowledges about some of the great things that people are doing. And so in past segments, we've had various people come on, and it just creates a really good friendship and knowledge base for the listener. So I really appreciate you coming and listening to the show today, because we have a very special guest. I've been hoping to interview this person for some time, and we finally found a time that worked for us. So we have Amanda St. Marie here today. And we'll find out more about her in a few seconds. We'll see where she's from and what she's doing here at the university, and some of the special events that she's doing and the work that she's doing in her faculty. So I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be on this show. And anytime I get to chat with you is always a good day. So I'm glad that we finally were able to get together and record this episode. Absolutely.
Well, I got to know you a little bit over the last year or two since I've been here, and some of the things that you've started in your faculty, and maybe we'll go there and see what you're doing. But before we do, let's find out where you're from and who you are, and
oh boy,
a couple of those things that you'd like to talk about yourself.
Oh, sure. So I grew up here in Kitchener-Waterloo. I am a member of Matachewan First Nation, which is about 8 hours north of KW. I say it's located in the Bermuda Triangle of the North. That's my own branding of it.
Okay.
So there's Timmins, Kirkland Lake, and then Sudbury. And so Matachewan's somewhere in that little triangle up there, about an hour and a bit west of Kirkland Lake. And it's actually just been within the last few years that my sister and I have been making our way up there for powwow every year. And we went up for a healing retreat back in October of 2022 or 2023. I can't remember. All the years are blurring together now.
Yes.
And so we've been really making an effort to reconnect and get to know our community up north. Because for me, it's always felt there's always been this disconnect. We're growing up here, but then being a member of a community way up north, and it's like I should know the people, I should know the community, I should know the land better than just being down here in an urban environment. And so that's a little bit about me. Born and raised here in Kitchener-Waterloo. Went to university here, went to college here, started off by going to Conestoga College first. When I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to study, and my parents said, well, while you're figuring it out, you got to learn something, you got to learn a skill. So I went to college first and studied advertising, and then after I graduated from that, I went to Laurier for communication studies. And then from there, it was right into industry. So I started off working for the Ontario Teachers Insurance Plan in marketing, and then bounced around to a lot of different companies with Sun Life Financial, Laurier, here at Waterloo, then ventured into tech. So I worked for Magnet Forensics and DeGero. And then I got a job at this consultancy firm called Overlap Associates, which was really interesting because the framework they used was human-centered design. So that was an interesting foray into that. And then I landed back here at the University of Waterloo in marketing. And then, yeah, I know. So my whole career has been in marketing communications and branding and those kinds of things. And I was doing marketing for the Faculty of Environment. And then they wanted to hire an Indigenous Initiatives Manager because I think Savannah Sloat, who's my counterpart in science, had been in the role for a little over a year. And Environment wanted the same type of role for their faculty. And so they had asked me, what do you think about this? And initially I had a little bit of trepidation because I thought, I don't know if I should take up space. I'm on my own reconnection journey. I'm trying to understand what this identity means. I'm reconnecting with community. I don't know if I'm the right person. And so I kind of was like, let me think about it. And I was actually talking with a couple of our students who are Indigenous in the Faculty of Environment, and one of them had said, like, you have to do it because we have actually very similar histories and very similar journeys in terms of reconnection. And something she had said to me was like, you've been such a great person to throw yourself into this. So like whenever I've been like, oh, I don't know about WISC, which is the Waterloo Indigenous Student Center, like you like, come on over, like let's go to soup and banding together, or at powwow, let's do an intertribal dance. And so they're like, you are really a good representation for me of someone who's like very similar and just doing it anyways, even though you do have your own fears, anxieties about reconnecting. So I think seeing you in this type of role would be great because we need to see more of that spectrum of identity and what it looks like. And so anyways, so I thought, okay, let me think about it some more. And then I went up to a healing retreat at Elk Lake. And I thought it was going to be a lot of storytelling and crafts, and then the first day they put us into a circle, and then there was a lot going on there, and it kind of cracked me open in a way that I didn't expect it to, and it completely changed everything. And I came back from that retreat and thought, okay, I think I know what my purpose is. I think I need to do this, and I need to explore this role. So. I decided to go for it and ended up getting the job. And so I rejoined the Faculty of Environment in January of 2024 in this role. So it's been a year and a little bit.
I kind of see that draw toward, I guess, the nervousness about getting into the role, because I think students will kind of go to you in a very similar situation you were in, maybe weren't raised in the culture as much as they hoped to be, or now just learning about it.
Yeah.
So now there's somebody in your faculty that they can kind of go to. It's almost like if you've been immersed in the culture a lot, it's a little bit more intimidating for a student maybe to say they weren't, right?
Yes.
Because there's an expectation kind of that we kind of live in, right? We're supposed to know certain things. Just because maybe you weren't raised in that, maybe it kind of makes them a little bit more nervous. So when they find somebody who's kind of like them, like you said, it probably makes it a lot easier for them to approach you, and you can all learn together. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, I'm learning so much from them, as much as I hope that they would learn something from me. It's like I've said throughout this year, I'm so envious of some of our students because of what they're able to do with their degree now. And so I talked to you a little bit about this one undergraduate student's final year thesis, and it kind of makes me well up a little bit. And I was trying to, like, oh gosh, don't get so emotional when I was watching her present her thesis poster. I just had this immense amount of like pride and joy. And it's like, wow, this is incredible. And there's parts of me that, I'm so proud. And it's like, we have like, this is exactly, I think, the vision we all have when we talk about indigenization and reconciliation in post-secondary education. Like this is it manifesting itself. And then the other part of me, there's like this sorrow because it's like, oh, I wish I could be there too, and learning alongside you and being able to like really dive in and tuck into some of this stuff in the way that you have. Because part of it, and sometimes I can get so into something and I can be running so fast that I stop to take stock of everything that I've been doing, and within the last year and a half, how much I've learned. It's a lot. Like it's a lot that I've just kind of thrown myself into and like have tried to absorb as much as I can, but not ever really being able to deep dive into any of it. It's like, okay, I've learned enough to be able to navigate this situation and to keep moving. But to be able to like kind of sink yourself in for 8 or 4 months on something is such a privilege too. Like, and that's where I said to the student, like, wow, like what you've been, like the community connections, the interviews, the time, and like the access to different individuals at different First Nations to talk about this subject matter. That's such a privilege. Like I wish I had that time. So it is, it is. Now I'm understanding like the importance of having someone like me in the role and how that can be a comfort.
But I also students. Kind of think your faculty environment should be maybe a foundational component to indigeneity here because of our relationship with the environment and what they teach over there. And I think when these students are recovering, some of our old traditional ways, like the moss making workshop and stuff like that, we don't even always know about those things. And when they do their research and they find something that we've done traditionally, it kind of opens up all our eyes, about the traditions and deep-rooted culture that we come from. So,
it was on the poster. The fact that this moss is like 25 times more absorbent than any other material, or its healing properties, or even how like they harvested it a year in advance of having the child, and like the role of the moss bag. And it was just fascinating to hear how traditionally we've used these natural elements in child rearing and those kinds of things. And so, it has actually sparked a lot of interest in her research because, we have these professors that they understand the moss or the environment in a certain type of way. But then you have someone coming in and introducing an entirely new angle to it. And it just provides a lot more meaning. And I think it just takes people back to traditionally, this is how the First Nations, the original peoples of this land, worked with the landscape, worked with the environment.
I think we get caught up in that time of contact when new technology was brought over here, and then things changed quite drastically for our people. But we didn't have steel pins and needles and stuff that made things easier, but we were able to get along quite well with our natural environment. So I think when students research those lifestyles that we had before all the technology, it's incredible. It wasn't that we were lacking anything. We knew how to work with the materials on this earth. And that's really what I like about projects like this, because we can talk about the new way of maple syrup, harvesting and hunting, in the way that we do now. But back in those days, we didn't have those technologies. So.
Yeah. And it was interesting because one of the insights she shared from the workshop that she held, the Moss Bag workshop, was, one of the participants had said, like, I know a little bit about the moss bag, but I didn't know about traditionally how we would have harvested the moss and how we would have cleaned it and all these other things. And so, again, it's like, bringing back some of that traditional knowledge and revitalizing the community again, because it's tapping into something that, someone maybe wouldn't even know to ask. Like, I had never heard of a moss bag until she had stopped by my office and it was telling me about her research project. And I thought, whoa, this is really interesting, as a fellow Anishinaabe too, right? So I was like, you keep me posted. Let me know how things are going. Tell me the progress on this. Because I'm like, this is so exciting. And I wish I could be sitting alongside you. But yeah.
So what's a typical day for Amanda? You come to work and you have an office and you have some projects that you're working on. I know you held a few great events that we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no day is the same.
Okay.
I would say I typically start the day off by looking at my calendar to say, okay, what kind of meetings do I have and how do I have to prepare for those? What's on deck in terms of events or initiatives or something that I'm percolating on, and then making sure that I carve out space for that. And then we just see where the day goes. But there's, no day is the same. That's for sure.
So do you have drop-ins, people come and visit you, students and staff? Or?
I wouldn't say that they're formal drop-ins. Okay. I try to be on campus at least 4 days out of the 5 days, if not all 5 days. Mm-hmm. And my door is typically open. So sometimes students just will knock and I'll say, come on in and we'll have a quick visit. Sometimes faculty stop by and, want to have a little chin wag and check in, or I'll just get a Teams message about things. Nothing too formal in terms of drop-in or office hours or anything like that.
It's kind of like paving the way because same thing in health. Yeah. When I started here, there was really nobody's ever done it before. So, you have to kind of create it. But then you have to kind of build relationships, with your faculty, your professors and staff. And it takes a little while to build that up because they're kind of wondering what you're doing here too. And
it's true.
Are we changing things, and stuff like that. So
what does it mean?
Yeah. What's it mean?
Yeah.
But I always link back to the actual commitment that the university in general made.
Yeah.
And what it's starting to happen is to filter into all the faculties that we have, to have an Indigenous knowledge keeper or somebody who can help them grow, indigenally, I guess, if that's a word.
It is now. Yeah.
But really what makes it successful is when you have the support, like here, Faculty of Health, 100% support, such an incredible way to work. And I know it's not that way everywhere, but you have to kind of build your own self being, in these faculties. You got to know who you are, and if their plans, how does that fit in there? Mm. So we here at this faculty had a great strategic plan that indigenized this faculty. And so that's why we're all on board with it here. Of course, you run into people who don't agree or just want to see a different way. And I think that's just natural for, what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of so I've always loved strategy. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, I've always loved puzzles and putting things how do we take this apart and put it back together? How does something work? And I've always, I've been so curious about things and like to kind of wrestle with them and figure out what does this mean to me. And so when I started in the faculty, there was no real roadmap or anything. It was like, you're here. Let's see what you do with this and what you come up with. And so it was very intimidating. It was very daunting because it was like, oh my gosh, I can feel the pressure and the weight of this. I'm obviously representing my community and I want to do a good job, and I want to do right by the Faculty of Environment. I want to do right by our Indigenous community. So I really, felt the pressure, but then it got to a point where, okay, we just need to roll up our sleeves and start to, get into the weeds on things and start to figure things out, which was kind of exciting because as somebody who did marketing, I was only exposed to certain aspects of the university, but in this role, I'm taking a look at curriculum. How is that made? What are different instructor styles? What's actually going into the course in terms of content? And then I'm looking at research, and Sarah Anderson and Jade Hill have been wonderful, and they've been showing me the ropes on research and what goes into that, and the intricacies of, a grant, and, how do you apply for research and all that stuff. And then there's the community building aspect of it. So it was like, okay, taking a look at, Waterloo at 100, taking a look at the vision that the Faculty of Environment is creating and the process of creating, taking a look at the commitments that our president has made, the university has made, and like taking a look at all of that. And then, okay, what does this mean for environment, and how do I operationalize these things? So last year was a lot of just listening and learning and relationship building, getting to know people. I know our dean, Bruce, likes to always jest that I'm very chatty, very, very chatty. But I think for me, yes, I am. That's always been my MO. I have been very chatty, even as a child. But I think for me, it's also, to your point, to information gather, and to get to know somebody, see, what motivates them, what's important to them. Little pieces. Like I remember when I was at this one job, and I'd only been on the job for about a month, and someone was like, "Oh, our coworker's birthday is coming up. Does anyone know their favorite color?" And I said, "Oh yes, it's brown." And they were like, "You just started here, though. How do you know that?" And I was like, "Well, I was just talking. I noticed that she wears a lot of brown, and so I was like, oh, do you really like brown?" Anyways. And they're like, "You've only been here 2 weeks, though, but you know all these little intricate, like these little things about everybody." But it just comes up in conversation. And so for me, getting to talk one-on-one and have conversations, and it doesn't necessarily need to be about work. It could be about anything. You never know what someone's going to share with you. And I that's what I love about being chatty and all that.
you just exemplified my first day as chief when I was elected on my First Nation, because there was no paper that said this is your job, right? So I sit in my office first day. What does a chief do? What is it? Okay, I got this real good role. What is it? Yeah. So like you coming into that office, and then same thing, starting to build that relationship with the people that you work with, and try to find those relationship builders, and kind of grow it from there. So I think that's kind of like, in a sense, what we do as Native people, like in a society that didn't really recognize Indigenous people at a real high educated level, right? They were always in the minds of Canadians, the people of poverty, the residential school victims, When you think of Indigenous people in general, I think your mind goes to the murdered, missing women, children, the 215 kids and stuff like that. So what I'm hoping at some point that the mindset of Canadians or all people will change, where they're doing what you're doing in your faculty. Instead of going to the negative, we're going to Native people are trying to protect the earth. They're doing things to keep this earth healthy. So I don't know if that'll happen in my lifetime. It's just that we've come out of residential schools and it's on the minds of people. Yeah. So that kind of goes there first. But if a day ever comes, when the first thing, when you think of an Indigenous person, you think about, we are the caretakers of this land, and we're going to make sure our Mother Earth stays healthy. So in my mind, when you went to the Faculty of Health and you started, or Faculty of Environment, I was kind of hoping that would be kind of a platform at some point to get all those students to recognize Indigenous ways of knowing, and the contributions that we have to solidify the Earth's general well-being. And if we can kind of send that message out to people, even in health or math or philosophy, it nestles on the health of our environment. If our water's healthy, and you have a tremendous professor there that's working really hard to do this.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so those are like the foundational pieces that I think can create a new generation of students that have knowledge that I think is desperately needed today.
Oh my gosh. And they're so, they want that so much. The students, they're so hungry for that. Even like I volunteered at a open house last fall, and the number of high school students and applicants who came to the Healing Forest exhibit that Sophia and I were stationed at, they're learning about this already in high school, and so the serious questions were, how will Indigenous or indigeneity be a part of my degree? And something that I've explained to a lot of people is that, like, being a year in, something that I think would be really important is I don't want it to run alongside everything that we do in environment. I actually want it to be woven throughout. And so I've been working on what are some of the core courses that environment students take, and how do we, as we evolve them, how do we weave in Indigenous content so that from first year to when they're walking across the stage, they have the skill set to be able to work in a good way with Indigenous communities, and that they understand the knowledge and the expertise that Indigenous communities here in Canada or even globally bring to the environment, bring to the world. And I'm starting to see a little bit of that shift, especially when we look at the wildfires. And like we have been doing that for a very long time. And so now I can kind of see, especially with the Indigenous Guardians program that the federal government runs, like we're seeing a turning of the tides where like there is a place for that traditional ecological knowledge, and old traditional ways are starting to, there is real value in that. These folks know the land in a same but different way than everybody else. And what's really encouraging is that there are many faculty members in environment that they really want this to be part of the curriculum. It's also that toggle of, you can't have it all right now. Yes. We've got to build that. We've got to ready ourselves for what that next step is. But I mean, ultimately, like I tell people, I'm working myself out of a job, so that eventually this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, Indigenous knowledge, it just will feel like it's always been a part of the curriculum and environment, or a part of research and those kinds of things. But there's still like a lot of learning that we have to do. So
don't lose that train of thought, because I want to go into a beautiful artist who has come to the University of Waterloo not too long ago. But he came with this, I guess, in-depth passion for music. And we had him on our show not too long ago. His name is Gladwin Badger. And he's a tremendous artist with a passion of music. You're going to see more of him in the next couple of years, probably at a Juno Award or something like that, but definitely has something that he was born with. And his story that he talks about in the podcast kind of gives you a chance to know who he is and how we got into what he's doing today. So we're happy and privileged to play some of his music for you on this show. And one of the songs that he's produced and recorded, he let me name it. So I'm really happy. Nemki O De Ing is the name of the song. And this is for you right now. Miigwech. So we were talking earlier about this transition within the faculty. I know it's not always perfect, but I'm sure there is some difficulties that you face, maybe just theoretically, maybe, or because you're in a faculty that's been there and established, and they've kind of gotten comfortable with how they do things.
Yeah.
Like, have you run into many obstacles like that? Just the theory changing or Indigenous?
I think it's interesting. Like I think last year when I was in the role, when I first started, I had like a existential crisis because I think people wanted, and I don't think it was, I think it was just accidental, but I think a lot of folks just expected me or wanted me to be more than what I actually am in terms of, what I could bring. I think there's this notion that like I'm all knowing, all seeing, and it's like, what? No, how could any of us?
Yep.
We're all still learning. We're all still in this period of growth, and to some degree, all of us are reconnecting and trying to get back to our roots in many ways. And so I also put so much pressure on myself to be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I know that? Or, and then I go back to our teachings, and like, we're supposed to be constantly learning, and we're supposed to be humble, and, checking that ego and those kinds of things. So I think there was that as a barrier. And then there was people who are just looking for that, like, what's the playbook on reconciliation? And it's like, it doesn't exist. So all the universities are entering into this, and each university is kind of finding their way and what makes sense for them based on the territory that they're on, the Indigenous folks that they hire, those kinds of things. Like there really isn't like this is how it's done on the curriculum, and this is how it's done on the research, and we're building that. And as new information comes to light, then we're iterating on that. So it was kind of like just asking people to give me the grace of time to kind of wrestle with this and figure out what makes sense to us as a faculty. And then on the other side, I think there's this, what for non-Indigenous people, what am I allowed to teach? What am I allowed to say? And there's this fear of cultural appropriation. And then there's like, am I doing something wrong? Am I not doing something wrong? And how do you talk to somebody who is maybe, dancing that fine line of appreciation and appropriation, and how do you have those difficult conversations to say, like, I love this passion, but you also have to know that that kind of information should be coming from a knowledge keeper and not from you. And so, yeah, there's been a little bit of, plus there's like, there's resistance to something that you don't know and don't understand. And so there's always that fine dance that we're doing. And there's always these tensions, like sometimes it's a little slack, sometimes it's a little taut. And so you kind of have to navigate those. But I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier, building those relationships with people who are going to be really good allies and who have a good heart and good intentions, and leaning into those and seeing, okay, what's possible. Something that I love about this role is like, coming from a really creative background, there's always going to be tensions amongst creatives. That's part of creativity and collaboration and all those things. And so it's very similar, but it's different. Like, instead of talking about design and branding and, identity and key positioning and things like that, we're talking about something entirely different. But given the state of the university right now, and, what we're faced with just generally in post-secondary education, now is the time where we do have to be a little bit more creative and take some more risks than typically we would as a faculty or as a university. And for me, it's like, this is a really good time for, reconciliation and indigenization to kind of enter the chat, so to speak, because we are starting to take a look at, is how we've always been doing things, like, is business as usual like what we want to continue on? I don't think it can. So how does it evolve? And then this is where I think my role and what I'm hoping to achieve in the faculty of environment can kind of enter in and say, this is actually how we should be doing things, or how I think we can evolve the faculty in terms of how we do things. And so
I kind of think too, if we ever get to that point where it's not a specialty, the Indigenous component to it, it's just naturally there.
yes.
So I think then people won't have those nervousnesses, because this is our foundation. We've taken on Indigenous perspectives, and we introduce those here at the faculty. So they, like smudging ceremonies here are pretty regular now. So we have ceremonies that anybody can come to. So it's now kind of come to a point where people kind of expect that now, and they see it. Now we have art here, that people can kind of use as a reference point, to learn. And I think that's where it all should land at some point. Like, rather than to be, there's my Indigenous stuff here, I'm pretty happy about that. It's already embedded within the faculty.
Yeah. And it's like, that's the stuff that I'm really interested in. And so for me, it always comes back to like that intentionality. Mm-hmm. When I first started, I had met with some of the student groups, and someone was like, we need more paintings, we need more of this, and then I'm like, I know that can be seen as performative, but at least there's something. And I thought, okay, yes, and I think that there's a way we can do it and go about it that could be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more intentional than just doing that. And so, we finally, we haven't launched this yet, and we're in the throes of it right now. I'm working with plan ops and facilities, but we finally entered into a partnership with the Moccasin Identifier, which is an organization that Carolyn King created, born out of Mississauga, so the credit there. And I thought this partnership came about from a former professor in the Faculty of Environment that had been working with Carolyn for a number of years. And then they brought this project, the Moccasin Identifier project, to our dean and said, we should be doing something. And so over the course of, I would say, 2 to 3 years, we have been forming this relationship. And it was, I think, January of this year that we finally signed that partnership agreement. And so we will be doing an art installation that's made out of steel outside of the Faculty of Environment. And so, which I'm really excited about, but it involves concrete and engineers and all this other stuff. And so, but for me, it's like that, the direction we decided to take with that, with Carolyn and her crew, it's packed with so much meaning. It's meant to ground people in the space. I wanted it to be an outdoor installation because I wanted that connection to land, water, all that to be present, and I wanted it to be a moment of reflection in terms of reconciliation, in terms of the territory that we're on, all these things. So I wanted whatever art installation that we pursued as a faculty to do a bit of work for us. And also like really stand the test of time. Like we're leaving a legacy. This is our first foray into reconciliation. And so I wanted it to really pack the punch, so to speak. So
that's going to look great, I think.
I'm so excited. Like it's genuinely like the most exciting initiative that I've been keeping under my hat for a while, just because I there's so much work yet to be done.
Of course.
But I'm hoping to launch it in September.
Wow.
And yeah, so and we're gonna get there, but it's something that I'm like, when this happens, it'll fill my heart with so much pride and joy.
It kind of reminds me of when we were building the gathering space outside. We would see each other outside once in a while and just watch the progress of that thing, and the visuals I think is really important. It's just that when I had an optometry student come by here one time, and he had an orange shirt on, and I just happened to look, this guy looks native. So I went and approached him.
Yeah.
And he said, I just came in from BC because we got the only optometry, school in Canada. Yeah. And he said, I don't even know if I should be here because there's nothing here that says they welcome Indigenous people. Mm. And that struck a nerve with me, like really strongly. So I had that conversation with our our dean here, and I said, we got to start showing something that people can feel that they're part of. And so he kind of stirred that in my mind. Let's get some more stuff going. I know visuals can be just place setting, you can look at it from that perspective, but if there's nothing, then it's even more damaging sometimes.
Absolutely.
So when our students feel like they're welcomed here, then I think they feel like this is their university, and they're more apt to kind of probably progress through it.
Yeah.
But then the internal mechanism has to kick in. We got to start getting into those curriculum developments and bring that exposure, to all these faculties. So where we're kind of at right now, like we had a curriculum team. Unfortunately, we don't have as many now, but, finance dictates a lot of stuff here, especially during a financial crunch that all universities are in right now. But the nice thing is they didn't really touch the Indigenous roles here.
No.
Where we're usually on the bubble. We're usually the first ones to go during a financial crisis, or but we're still here. We have OIR, who's developing, bringing now the student services more centrally.
Yep.
So WISC, as you mentioned earlier, now is going to be coming on main campus now.
Yeah.
And I think just more central and more easy for students to use that way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of transitions that are happening here, like with the different faculties. And the vision, way back when I started here, was that every faculty would have somebody like your role there. We're not there yet with all of them yet.
Yeah, not yet.
But, I think we laid some good foundational work that they're all looking at it and building it.
For sure. And so on the curriculum front, working with Madison Hill, too, has been such a delight. Madison... I always love every conversation that the two of it. I never know where it's going to go. And so we've been working on Indigenous storytelling module for a first year environment class. And that's been like a lot of fun to put together because, for me, I'm a big reader. I love film, love television. And so, being able to bring in all these different cultural elements and then, of course, having Madison come in and bring in different things that she's seen and making those connections and building that out. And we're now working on our second module, which is all about how to work in a good way and what does that mean and things like that. And so, and like, how do you build a good relationship and meaning respectful relationship? And so that's been like a lot of fun, but we also just drafted a process on how the two of us would like to work with faculty instructors moving forward.
Okay.
And it's, I think what I would assume what's probably jarring is the amount of time we need. Okay. But we base this on a really positive experience we had with an instructor in environment on, let's see where you want to go and then with your curriculum and your outline, and then we'll figure out where we can start to weave information. And then we presented our ideas and where we're going in the module. And the instructor was like, wow, this is really exciting. Actually, the things that you touch on in Indigenous storytelling, I'm touching on, but from a different angle. So I love that this is now complementing one another. And so we were like, this is awesome. This is going really good. We should make this the model for how we want to work moving forward. So that instructors get a sense of, a lot of this is the relationship building. A lot of this is, getting into what is it that you want to bring to this course, and then how can we support you, but also giving us the autonomy and the freedom to go away and make those decisions, have you trust us to make those decisions and know that it's going to complement the course. So yeah, the curriculum thing is an exciting space right now. And then I just actually hosted a medicine bag / pouch workshop as part of Invigorate, which is the faculty student led festival. And I wasn't sure what kind of turnout I would get, but I think we had about 25 to 27 people come and make medicine pouches. And,
Nice.
I kept it really high level in terms of we only had an hour. So I just wanted to let them know the meaning and the impact of the medicine pouch and a little bit about our medicines. And then we got to making the pouch, and everyone successfully made made a pouch, and the feedback I got was incredible. Like I had one student come up to me and say, I'm graduating and I'm going on a road trip out west, and I think that this pouch and what I'm going to pack in it is going to mean a lot to me during this time of my life. I'm going through like a massive transition because I'm now leaving the university, going out into, the world outside of Ring Road, and I'm traveling out by myself out west. I feel like there's a lot of meaning in this pouch. And so I was like, wow, that's incredible. And there was a couple of other stories, and Kevin George from the library had come over to me and said, you needed to say more about our sacred medicines. I said, Kevin, I think we could dedicate a whole hour just to sweetgrass. Sure. We could dedicate a whole hour just to cedar. So he's like, we should. I'm like, we have. Myeengun hosted a harvesting sweetgrass for first year environment students in the fall. And the students were like, I could have listened to a whole day on sweetgrass. They loved that so much. And it's interesting, some people in the workshop had actually attended the sweetgrass workshop back in September, and so they were like, this is building and on their knowledge, because they're like, now I understand, like I think you had referenced the pouch during your workshop, and so they're like, now I'm I still have my sweetgrass braid, and now I have a place for it, and so there's like, I see momentum, and actually tomorrow some students and some staff from environment, we're going out to the Woodland Cultural Center.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're doing a workshop on Six Nations land claims. We're doing a guided tour of the museum, and then we'll be ending the day with making a two-row wampum keychain.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that, and I think it'll be a great way.
I think when we do on-land teaching, like get out of the classroom, go visit these sites, go by the fire, and learn. It just has such a stronger impact. I mean, we learn both ways, but I think from our perspective, we kind of, the more you're on the earth and feeling that beautiful vibration of Mother, helping us learn, the nourishment starts to come so strong, and we get this building of why Indigenous people did the way they did before.
Yeah.
A way of education was always to make sure we have our natural environment around us, and our children benefited from that right from young. Because I know one of the stories I heard from colonization was we were terrible parents because we let our kids just run wild, and the theory behind that was not so much we let them run wild, but we let them learn at their pace. And for them, it was, I think maybe that's how residential schools kind of in their mind came to be. Let's get those kids in line. Let's make them listen to what we tell them, be seen, not heard, and things like that. Where that whole theory of Indigenous learning was, let's them experiment. Let's talk about our legends and our stories so that they can actually feel that when you go in the bush, you have to be respectful because there's dangers there. So our legends, our Nanabujo legends and other stories that we have gives them that ability to respect.
Yeah.
You go by a river, it's very dangerous for a child, right? Yep. So we had our stories of our serpents, and we had other stories that we talked about. And they got this incredible internal knowledge about respect.
Yeah.
Where I think we have to start, even at an adult coming here, I think maybe from that perspective, for non-Indigenous students to kind of come across that way. And give them a chance to feel that. It just makes a big difference. It
does. And I think as a society, I feel like we're not as connected to nature in the same way anymore. And I think about my childhood, and my dad, he was always like consequence teaching and learning. So like it's like, to your point, like, test that out. And then you see how that works out for you. If it works out well, great. If it doesn't, you're probably not going to do that again. So, my dad was always, based on consequence. And I always tell people, like, I remember we were camping up north, and I was playing on some rock or whatever. And my dad had come over to me and had said, Amanda Nicole. And whenever it was, he never really raised his voice, but when it was first name, middle name, you knew it was business time. And so it was, I immediately was like, uh-oh. And he's like, come over here, play over here. And what I hadn't seen, because I don't even know how old I was, but there was actually a rattlesnake on the same rock, sunning itself, but I hadn't seen it and wasn't really aware of that danger. And my dad wasn't freaking out or anything. He just like, Amanda and Nicole, we got to get over here. And then come over, and then he kind of explained, what was over on that rock so that I wouldn't freak out or panic or anything like that. And I think back, and there was I look back on my childhood so fondly because we did do a lot of camping, and I was exposed to a lot of different parts of nature. Now as an adult, I'm like, oh my God. But like, I was like, oh, you see me with porcupine? Like, that didn't really bother me, but now, or a bear. And now I'm like, oh, danger. But as a kid, I was like so curious. And so, I think back to that time, and like, probably people thought we were like unruly children or whatever, but we learned like that you have to respect, that snake, or you have to respect those things. And like, they win every day of the week.
Yes.
They'll win every day of the week. So don't be humble. Even when Melissa and I were in university, or I was in university, Melissa was in college, we were on a camping trip with friends, and we had come across a bear. And Melissa and I immediately, made ourselves large, stepped back, averted our gaze, because it was like a younger, maybe like a teenage bear. So we knew like a mom had to be nearby. And some of our friends were like, whoa, what the heck? Like, we have to go and take a picture of this. We have to go. We're like, no, give a wide berth, like take a step back, because we were taught, like, you have to respect a bear, but also do not ever trust a bear.
That's right.
And so, take back. And so, I would hope during that camping trip our friends learned from us, but they were like, I can't believe you wanted to back off from that bear. I'm like, I have a lot of respect for bears, to not kind of play around with that. So
I seen people like up north stopping to get close to a moose or something like that, and just like I guess if you don't know how much danger you're in, when you do that. Or even bears, like people like, oh, pretty bear, let's go. And then they get mauled.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, not pretty bear, not pretty bear. Like, they deserve like a lot, as much space as possible.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
But I think that was our teachings, like to be respectful, live amongst them.
Yep.
We used to go up to Cape Croker with an elder, and she would help us learn sweetgrass picking, right? So for her whole life, she lived in the area where there's bears, and she said she can tell when a bear is there. She can smell it actually before it gets there.
Wow.
So she said, I've encountered this bear many, many years, but we've always respected each other. We never did anything. So the students that she bring up there, she said, you might see him, and he might come close, but we've never had any problem with this. Wow. But don't aggravate him.
Yeah, don't test the waters. Don't test the waters.
Because they'll respect us too if we respect them, right? So,
absolutely.
You just have to know these things, and I think that's the part of Indigenous knowledge that's intrinsic within us. Like, we have to have this respect for it.
Yeah.
Just go and take pictures of them, and it might be a little more dangerous for you, but
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing now. What we have happening at this university, it's, I guess other universities have had this in their mind for a while, but I think here, it's taken its time, of course. We're getting there, but I think with you working in environment now, it really helps with this whole process to build Indigenous knowledge throughout this campus, and we all learn from each other.
Absolutely.
We have Haudenosaunee teachers, we have Cree teachers. We have Dr. Leonard, who actually comes from the East Coast, right, with a little different knowledge of what she knows. But when we put all that mindset together, like we're pretty. I'm pretty pleased with what we have and who we have here.
Yeah, me too. I think, like I said, you know, we've come a long way back when I think about my undergrad, and, you know, there wasn't like no one was really talking about Indigenous people back then. Like the TRC didn't exist, and it like whatever was brought up was typically about stereotypes, and you know, the way I was growing up here in KW, it always felt like we were just like a ancient being, you know, and because we weren't really connected to Matachewan in any way,
Right.
you know, because my father and his twin brother were adopted,
Okay.
and so there was that fracture. I think it was like I just had always seen us as, you know, something from the past that didn't really exist, and because we didn't have that connection, it just reinforced that story I was telling myself. But when I did get to university, I dedicated most of my studies to post-colonial literature, to Indigenous authors, and any sort of Indigenous research that was happening, and I was starting to really dig into it, and had actually dedicated my final paper of my undergrad. It was based on a photograph of the only photograph my dad has of him and his birth mother. And I wanted to investigate that in terms of, you know, how has photography as a technology of race defined us? And so I started to look at Edward Curtis, and, you know, he would walk around, or he would go around North America with his little trunk of regalia, and, you know, ask Indigenous people to dress up and kind of play that part, and those images would go back to Britain and kind of, you know, reinforce whatever stereotypes of this mythical Indian. And then I started to look at more contemporary works of Indigenous photographers who were kind of taking that back and looking at the urban Indigenous, and what does this mean? And then exploring, you know, how does Indigenous elements or artifacts show up in museums? And so, you know, you looking at what's the museum in Ottawa where there was like moccasins and
Yes.
but that's like that's footwear of the present day. You know, like these things aren't artifacts; they're not a thing of the past. Like I still wear moccasins in my house, and you know, or even out, you know, to work or whatever. Like it's still like a present thing. And so I was interrogating that notion, and then looking at how this stereotype has been frozen in time in architecture. So there's like certain friezes in actually banks, like a lot of banks and old Montreal and stuff like that have these carvings of Indigenous people in their stonework, and even actually locally here in Kitchener-Waterloo in the old Sun Life building on Union.
Right.
In the old part of the building, there's this fireplace that has all these wooden carvings, and there's beavers and there's Indigenous people carved into that, and so it kind of reinforces or freezes us in that time. So that's kind of but then I also looked at, you know, how is this like this relationship frozen in this photograph, and like what does it mean, and reading the body language of the two of them and things like that. And so that's how I kind of culminate, like that was the end of my undergrad, and then it was like there was that tension of like, oh, I want to explore this further, but I also need a job.
Yeah, of course,
and
yes.
I need to pay off my student loans.
Yeah.
And so I decided to not pursue my master's, and I went on to industry and started working, and kind of haven't looked back. But every once in a while, like I feel the itch of, you know,
Absolutely.
wanting to go and dive a little bit deeper into some of these things. So for me, it's like, it's really serendipitous that, you know, I'm in this role at the university, because university is really where I was able to start to dig into this identity, and what does it mean to me, and how do I feel about all these things. And so to be here but exploring it from a different angle
Absolutely.
is quite sweet. So
Well, I want to say thank you for your time today, and sharing some of your stories here at Nish Vibes, and giving us a chance to know a little about who Amanda is, and your role here at the university. We've had some really nice discussions, and worked together on a few projects and things like that. So it's been a pleasure, you know, working with you, and a pleasure having a conversation with you today. So thanks, Amanda, for coming out to Nish Vibes, and I always want to thank our technician, Nor, for all the work that she does, getting this all produced in a good way. Yeah. But I want to tell the audience, you know, like what we're doing here, I think it's just trying to create an avenue for conversation, for building Indigenous knowledge. And I think when we enact some of those teachings and understandings, we can create a better generation going forward of unity, of allyship, of friendship that we can use to better this world. Because in our theory, we have to think about the next generations to come. And if we lay the foundation for them to know how Indigenous people have always thought about that, I think I can feel better about our future and our children growing up in a better world. We're in a very political crisis right now. We're in a difficult time in society with wars traveling around the world. Thinking that has really been exposed to, undermine our responsibilities, with our environment. So I think with that said, maybe these conversations, one today with Amanda, will help you know that there are people still thinking about the future and universities that are willing to work with us too. So that's how I'd like this show to be produced today in that sense. So thank you again for coming to visit us, Amanda. And I want to thank you, audience, for always being a part of Nish Vibes. It's always an honor to spend this hour with you. So with that said, Chimigwech in my language means thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next one. Bamapi Minwa, which means we'll see you again. Bye.